Hello everyone, welcome to Cedar Tech Talk series. So today we are having a very interesting speaker, Bertrand Losso. And Bertrand Losso is from European Space Agency, and Bertrand has been doing a lot of work in machine learning for Earth observation data. And the topic of the talk today is very interesting. It's about applying machine learning when you don't have enough label data. I hand it to you now, Bertrand.
Okay, thank you very much, Quan, for the nice introduction. So, as I said, as Quan said, this is the topic of this talk is to go beyond labels. So just to explain a bit the context, we all know. I hope that most of you know, especially if you're interested in computer vision or even Earth observation, whatever, machine learning, that there were very important changes in the way we can apply machine learning in the last decade, because now we have large public data sets for almost every task. So large amounts of data which are able to be processed, on where you can first design some algorithms, but then also evaluate them, testing them, see where it does not work. And actually, this is true for computer vision. And maybe you've heard about ImageNet, which was one of the game changers in the area. And in the remote sensing community, the Earth observation community, we have also followed this movement, and there are lots of developed public data sets for lots of tasks that are perhaps a bit peculiar to remote sensing, like land cover mapping, change detection, detection of building from the sky, etc. Okay. One thing that one can notice with respect to this data set is that first, they are usually very tiny, even if there is the same trend than in computer vision to make bigger and bigger data set. In Earth observation, we have the whole planet on this image a few times and several times a year. So basically, we have tremendous amounts of data. Also, for instance, in Uncover, we have very few classes, let's say 20, 50, that's kind of thing, not the 1,000 of ImageNet. So not the same kind of granularity. And most of all, in Earth observation, one thing that really differs is that every day is a new day for our planet. And so the world is changing, is even evolving fast, and I could say faster and faster. So one issue we have with all the data sets that are available now is that they are designed for fully supervised methods. So when you are able to get labels, annotations for all the data in the training set, and that is first not true for computer vision. Most images are not labeled, but it's even more prominent in Earth observation because there are very few annotations on tremendous amounts of data. Okay, so just to fix a bit, to set the ideas, just consider a very simple case, which is called the semantic segmentation, so pixel-wise classification in computer vision. The interest of that in Earth observation is quite straightforward. Basically, you can do automatic cartography, determine the land use, what is the land cover, and not surprisingly, deep learning is the state of the art in this area. Okay, so for instance, on here I cited a few data sets which are quite reference benchmarks for the community. You get more than 90% on iSpheros data sets, or the 80% on the Houston DFC 218. Same for that. And so after, let's say, 5-6 years now of deep learning applied to observation, there is this kind of general knowledge You get a data set, you get the labels, and you can train what you want, and you can predict, and it will work. So that is good news. Now, there is also, let's say, some bad news. Is that you do not have the labels for in most of the cases, right? Just because, as it is written here, the world is not fully labeled. All the images of the world you can have are not labeled. So actually, in this talk, I will try to discuss three problems that I try to identify here. So the first one is what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly label. It is when you have some data and you have some labels with it, but basically it is not the one that you would like to have. Basically, you have boxes when you would like to be able to find regions, and that's an issue. Another problem or setting, use case we can have is that when you have some data, you have some labels, but you have lots of new data that you would like to classify. How can you do the few more labels to get better precision on better models? And finally, this talk will end with, let's say, maybe what is one of the most challenging problems now. You have data with labels, so as here, and you have lots of unlabeled data. And this is exactly what we have with the satellite imagery right now. Because unlabeled data is coming down every day, every week, and are stored in big computers, but we cannot know what to do with that. And this one, of course, is the problem of the next years, and will have to be solved. So actually, there are solutions already that can be planned to solve these three problems. So namely weekly supervised learning, continual learning or lifelong learning, and for the last one, semi-supervised learning. So learning a bit from the data with labels and learning a lot from the data with no labels. Okay, so let's move to the first part, the weekly supervised learning. And for this, I will introduce maybe a use case that it is, I mean, this problem of weak labeling or bad labeling is really, can be seen very easily. It is a change detection issue. On here, I start with a data set that we released with a former PhD student of mine, Rodrigo Daut. And this is a huge data set for which you have two dates, 2006 and 2012. Okay, and for each one you have the same area on aerial imagery. Also, for those two dates, you have the land cover map like this. And this is, as you can see, quite a rough map because it is based maybe on the cadastre information that you can find. It was from the Urban Atlas, Copernicus Urban Atlas dataset. And you can also have the change map. And if you look at those maps, which are the references, so you see, okay, I can train my algorithms first to do the land cover mapping and also to do the change detection mapping. But if you look closely, you will see that the true changes are not the same as what can be seen in the change map, right? And actually, it becomes even more complicated when you look very closely. Here are the change issues. Here, for instance, you have just a new building, but the whole area is designed as a change. Same here. It is very difficult to spot the differences, but there are actually. There was new buildings, new houses built, and actually there is an issue in the ground truth, which is a ground not so true truth. Here the same. you have seemingly no changes, and it seems that there is one change in the reference data. So all this kind of issues can be labeled as can be called label noise. And our problem here is how to learn from this and how to overcome this kind of wrong information to get a precise delimitation of the true changes. So first thing you could do would be to just count on the regularization property of your network. This is what we tried first. Okay, you have this image, this new building, the ground truth, a bit too big, and the prediction of a network. Actually, you can see that it's not so bad because it is centered on the ground on the new building, but of course, lots of area which was not changed is also detected because I mean you did not give the right information. So the idea Rodrigo and us came up with was to use quite old idea. This is called guided anisotropic diffusion, and it is based on two quite old papers, especially by the notion of history now in computer vision, where basically only what has been done in the last 5 years really counts. But actually, even 20 or 30 years ago, people were doing computer vision and were pretty good at that. And Pietro Peronna and Jitendra Malik came up with this idea of diffusion in 1990. K-Ming A also applied this to some kind of guided filtering to get a better image cleansing in 2009. And actually, by combining both of them, you can do this. That is, you have a guide image, you have an input image, and based on the edges, on the uniform parts of the guide image, you will be able to refine the input image to get a very precise mask. So the idea, this was the basic idea, and we applied that to change detection. If the first prediction can be that, then by applying just as a post-processing guided anisotropic diffusion, you can reach exactly the delineation of what has changed in the image. That's nice. And actually, this was the first step in our reflection. But of course, we wanted to go a bit further. The idea then was to iterate between the model of the network that we are training and also the reference labels that we know are not correct enough. And we also, so we alternate the model training, the network training, on the reference data cleansing, because data cleansing is actually one of the first things that were done in weekly supervised learning. So basically, this is quite a dangerous process because where you have to be very cautious. But the idea here is once you train your network, then you clean the reference data and you retrain using the new reference data. And after a few iterations, as we will see, we're able to get the correct prediction. And actually, here, when I speak about caution, it's really that in the process, we have to keep in mind that we still always keep the original reference data as a basis in the loss function, because otherwise there will be some kind of divergence. But so if I move, sorry. If I come back here, if we keep the intersection of the cleans data on the original reference data, so on one, we're able to reach some better performances than original. So here a few examples of what can be done. Here you have the noisy reference data, naive prediction, and the kind of exact prediction of the changes between the two image 1 and 2. Okay. So just to summarize, here two ways in these algorithms. First, the use of guided anisotropic diffusion for processing the reference and the results, and also the fact that we iterate and alternate between both model training and data cleansing. The code for this is available. And this was originally presented at CVPR Earth Vision workshop in 2019. So, I mean, if you have this kind of problem, what I can encourage you is to use this code, to try this code at least, and to see if it can be useful for you. So I just made a check that everyone is going on well and that you still see me and hear me. Is that correct? Yeah?
Yeah, we hear you and see you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I continue for the second part, which is let's say a different issue. And this is the few labels more case. Sorry, I hear noise, but that's okay. No. So here we still want to do some kind of semantic segmentation, the same as before. Here we're not in the change detection case. This is just the most simple case of land cover classification, which is actually quite common both in computer vision and in Earth observation. The use cases for us, for instance, can be land cover classification, building detection, and so on. And here you can see, for instance, the kind of issues we can have. This is the ground truth. So basically, you have here a building, and you have here something that is not really easy to distinguish. Those are parking lots or sport courts. I'm not sure of what it is exactly, but the initial segmentation of a network trained on this kind of data will be to detect two buildings here. And that's not the truth. So the idea is to add a human in the loop, and this is called interactive learning. And the human in the loop will be able to provide new information that will be able to drive iteratively the system to get the perfect segmentation. So here, for instance, just by adding these 3 clicks on the wrong zone, you are able to get this refined segmentation. Okay, so this is what we aim to do. And now I will present you 2 approaches to do this kind of interactive learning. So, and just for the record, the baseline we use here is LinkNet. And so basically, here are some results on the PostDam dataset, where you can see results are very good with this network, but you can have some kind of misclassified areas. It happens, especially, I don't know, because of artifacts maybe in the image, but the network is not perfect and can do this. So, for instance, the first approach we presented, it was last year at ISPRS Congress, is called DISE, which means Deep Image Segmentation with Interactive Refinements. And here the constraint we have is that as soon as you have a human in the loop, you want to be very fast to do the job. So the idea was, I mean, the idea of being fast is not something that is very in line with deep learning, because just training a network Nowadays it can take a few hours, but a few years ago it was weeks that were necessary for that. So having a human in the loop that come every 5 weeks to make a new improvement is absolutely not something that you don't want. So here we came up with an idea which was quite already used in computer vision. And the idea is that we had one new channel, which is the annotation channel to the RGB image, or let's say the image channels. When you train your model, you will be able to pick. When you train your model, you can sample from the ground truth some virtual annotation from that. So basically, you are able to know to have a model that is able to handle the 4 channels, RGB, the color ones, on the annotations. The first result is something like that. And then at inference time, you can enter in the interactive loop. Here, the labels are not provided randomly from the ground truth because there is no ground truth. We are at test time, but the annotator is able to click on the image and then can correct and provide the new information that is processed by the same segmentation model than used before. Okay, so here the key idea is the concatenation of annotation and RGB as input. And the very interesting point is that you have no retraining at all. Okay, so of course this is very fast. This is the time of your inference network. Okay, so this was a first successful attempt to do interactive learning. So we did a bit of study on how to encode actually the annotation. But then we wanted to go a bit further because yeah, this is machine learning. So of course we want to train again and to adapt our classifier because one issue with this here is that you are only able to propagate the information of the click of the annotation locally. You can, if you correct in some place in the image, you will not have some change very far from that. So if, on the contrary, you are able to train in a fast way our network, we are able to get some kind of global improvement on all the image. And this is why we moved to continual learning on the proposed DISCA. So this was actually presented at the ECML PKDD MACLean workshop. MACLean workshop is a workshop for Earth observation in this machine learning conference. Actually, Gaston Lengsner, so I guess he's in the audience right now, got the best student paper award for this. And with DISCA, the interesting thing is that you are able to retrain the model. How are we doing that? Basically, you have your initial segmentation model, okay? This on the left is the first approach, so this here with no retraining. But if we go on DISCA, actually we will use the annotation as a sparse ground truth. And so we are able to retrain the model with that. One issue here could be catastrophic forgetting. This is the usual name for it, is that you are providing information, but you just wipe out the initial information that was stored in the model. So to deal with that, actually, we have a regularization with the first segmentation that is already almost good. Let's say that in most cases, segmentation prediction is around 70–80% of accuracy. So this is already a good basis to start. But you just combine that with the new annotation. And then you just do a backpropagation on your model, and you have slightly adapted model that is able to get this kind of result. And actually, we see that there are some improvement of this car with respect to this year. Here, for instance, you can see some kind of comparison between both. More precise areas, especially on buildings, if you compare the big buildings here. And actually, what is also interesting is to think in terms of time you spend to annotate and to correct your image. Because actually with this here, you could be able to learn the same level of quality, but you need much more annotations and much more time on interactions with the human in the loop. Okay. When it is this was one finding that made us very happy, is that there is a use case where this becomes very, very interesting. It is domain adaptation. So for instance, you train on data set on, you have your new application domain that is a new city that you've never seen before, and you will apply your model train in some place to this new place. So we train on IIRS datasets and apply on ISPS PostDAM. On here, you can see the comparison. So in blue, you have something that is trained locally, and in red, you have the original performance of the model trained in another place. And we can see here that, for instance, for detecting buildings on Potsdam, were very bad results originally because there is this domain transfer issue. But just by slightly modifying with this car the initial model, we are able to get this more than 30% improvement, and so reach the same performance as if you had the data in the new data set. Okay, so actually this kind of active learning, of interactive learning, can be a very good solution to the domain adaptation issue. And this has lots of potential impact, I guess, for even business companies that want to make money from that, because you train a model, you can apply almost everywhere with a few efforts. So in a nutshell, the take-home message here is that with this here, you can go very fast, but local, which is already something interesting. If you are able to spend a bit more time, you can have a global improvement and so better performances. And now we are investigating active learning to make it even better. And from the discussion I had this morning, I know that you will soon have something new and very promising to hear about. So a slightly different study we made actually for using this kind of sparse annotation. So in this case, it was not a human in the loop, but using crowdsourced points. So the one you can get from people, for instance, using a GPS enabled phone. And so you get some information like in situ data, which are geolocalized. And here your use case was to be able to provide better flood maps when you have some kind of flooding somewhere because of heavy rains, tempest, or everything like that. So you have a flooded area and you want to be able to assess really quickly the damages, to be able to maybe to guide the rescue teams, but also to evaluate the damages. So from the sky, you are able to obtain this kind of course map. But if you got some also some in situ data as a georeference point, you are able to get some very fine maps and get also the potential routes. And so for this, we use it was a collaboration with Cloud2Street, which is a non-profit company from the US. And we come with this kind of refiner network. So we are able to use the data from social media or train or someone that is really going on site. And and we published that, so it's quite a recent work at the climate change with AI workshop at NeurIPS last year. And actually, what we found is that it's very possible to get some very precise maps, especially, for instance, in this kind of area, when you have to find this kind of linear element that is the river, standard network are not good, but if you add the crowdsourced point, you are able to really get something that is close to the reality, where the river was out of its bed or not, and so get an idea of what is going on the terrain. Okay. So I think I am still on time. I'm reaching the third part of this talk. And this is the one about semi-supervised learning. So, as I said before, there are lots of data sets which are designed for supervised learning. So basically, you have all the data are labeled. Maybe you can do some kind of cross-validation. So you have your training set, you also test set for which you do not look at the reference data, but anyway, you will train with all the data, with all the possible data on all the possible data as labels. And we wanted to do something that is a bit more realistic because, as I said, much of the data that you can access in Google Earth Engine, the Copernicus Sentinel Hub, for instance, those are data that are not labeled. So we built Mini France. What is Mini France? Let's say a small version of France seen from the sky. We selected 16 cities. We got very high resolution aerial imagery, 50 centimeters per pixel. And we also add the land use classes from the Copernicus Urban Atlas. And basically, this is the kind of data that you can find in Mini France. And there are lots of variety, both in the kind of imagery that you get, because the cities are quite different. I mean, cities near the Mediterranean are very different from the one in Brittany or in the north of France. So you have some visual variety in those images. And you have also variety in the classes, as you can see, roads, forests, urban environments, and so on. Okay. And we designed that for semi-supervised learning. What does it mean? It means that the half of the data set is for testing, 8 cities. The other half is for training. Okay. But for this training data set, and differently from most of the data sets that you can see elsewhere, only 2 cities are provided with labels. It means that for these 6 cities, they are unlabeled. You don't have the labels. You only have the imagery. Is that okay? So 8 cities with imagery, 2 of them with the class labels. And this makes the problem of learning and training a network much more difficult, actually. Also, this figure to show you also the kind of let's say, challenge that we are trying to tackle is that Mini France is one of the biggest Earth observation data set that is available right now, with respect to the POSDAM data set I told you about before. Let's say that the areas here are proportional. So, I mean, POSDAM is just this tiny dot. Here you have HRSTD, this is a chance detection data set I told you also about before. DeepGlobe and XBD are also large-scale data sets that are available right now, but Mini France is one of the biggest. Now, I spoke before about the variety of appearances, and I told you also about the variety of classes and the variety of semantics. This is what you can see in the images, but we proposed tools to be able to really assess that you have this kind of variety. The first one is about the appearance similarity. And the question is, how can we assess it? Is our dataset really diverse, really varied? For that, we encoded all the images with a pre-trained CNN and use this TSCNI visualization. And you can see that quite hopefully, similar areas are grouped in the same regions of this appearance map made by TSCNI. Here, for instance, you have the cities. Here you have the open fields, the forest, and the Macchia Mediterranea regions will be here. Okay. And if you apply this kind of visualization tool to every city, you can see that lots of cities, the cities are differing a lot. Some cities, like this one, are englobing all the potential appearances that may occur. But some others, like Quimper in Brittany or Nice in the south of France, they are very homogeneous or correspond to a given type of appearance. Okay. And here the color say to us that here are the cities with the labels. Here the cities for which we have only imagery, and in red, all the cities for testing. And to make a good semi-supervised training set, you need to have all the appearances available in the training set. Not necessarily in the labeled one, but at least in the unlabeled split. And here you can see that you have this one. So all the, if you see, what does it mean is that if, for instance, you have an image here, you can learn the statistic about its appearance. But if you use only the labeled split, you will not be able to learn this kind of appearance. Okay, so there would be a mode collapse if you learn only with the labeled data. For the class representativeness, it's quite the same. Of course, if you want to be able to recognize a cat or a building, you need to have a few examples at least of what is a cat or building. So all the classes are represented in the labeled split. Okay, so to go a bit faster, this dataset is available for download or for you to design algorithms. All this information will be published. Yeah, it has been accepted for publication in Machine Learning journal and will be published in 1 month or 2. And last but not least, we also, of course, propose some deep learning approaches to do this kind of semi-supervised learning. And basically, what we propose are this kind of network, which are multitask network with various architecture. And basically, the idea is to have one head of the network that is able to do the supervised task. So when you have the labels, and the second loss function, the second task, which is designed to tackle the unsupervised learning. Okay, and by merging the two losses, you are able to do the semi-supervised learning. And so, is it possible to get something from semi-supervised learning? Fortunately for us, the answer is yes. Actually, we tested various kinds. So in this column, you have the supervised version. So only using the two training cities with labels. And if you have a look with various backbones at the results using semi-supervised approaches, so also using the 6 unlabeled cities for training, all the results are improving and are able to be better than supervised version. So basically, this is promising. And also, if you look visually at the results, you can see that basically you have less less wrong classes, on better defined roads, for instance, in the semi-supervised version. And the idea behind that is that from the unsupervised learning, we were able to learn some global statistic about what an Earth observation image look like. Okay. So now one question you can have is about the kind of task and the losses we can use for the different non-supervised learning. So actually we tried various stuff from reconstruction, so basically like an autoencoder, L1, L2 losses. We also, as our final aim is semantic segmentation, try to do unsupervised segmentation. So those, for instance, we introduce relaxed k-means, but also try the Mumford-Shah functional. And also, of course, there are lots of ideas now that are coming from self-supervised learning. So we also try this some pretty standard losses in this area. And the result that was that in all cases, we are able to improve the result with respect to supervised. So actually, every loss is good, but some of them are better. And basically, the segmentation losses, maybe because it is more or less the same aim that the one you try to get with the cross entropy, is the one that is working better. Okay. Visually, for instance, some kind of results. Here, for instance, you can see that with a segmentation loss, you find this big building in the middle of the image, which is corresponding to the ground truth. But with all the other ones, it was very difficult. And that's it. And so now I'm reaching the end of this talk, and just wanted to present you the next step that we are working on currently. And I guess, I mean, people who are used to this seminar will be reminded of a very interesting talk given by Anthony Faustin. I guess it was in September or October, about energy-based models. And actually, this is something that we are investigating right now. And so just to tell you about what is exactly an energy-based model, especially a joint energy-based model, it is the idea behind this is that when you have your standard classifier, for instance, your neural net, your softmax, on something that is able to learn the a posteriori probability of applying a class to some imagery, you can add some kind of new task. And actually, you can add a generative learning part, which is you want to also estimate in the meantime the underlying distribution of the data. So basically, here your PDX, probability of X being the image. Okay. And energy-based models are quite old. I mean, they were studied in the year 2K on following years. Basically, the issue with that is that you have to do some kind of Monte Carlo sampling to be able to optimize them. So it's a bit longer, but the interest, as we can see here, is that you are able to first classify on here. So here we are using the Eurosat dataset. Let's say that Eurosat is a bit like the CIFAR 10 of Earth observation. This is a classification-oriented dataset with 10 classes: industrial areas, residential areas, forest, fields, sea on lake, this kind of classes. Here on the right, you can see, for instance, two baselines which were proposed in the original paper. So basically, with a standard neural network, you are able to reach some quite perfect results. We used as our baseline wide ResNet, which is obtaining more or less the same kind of results. And we also train our joint energy model. So both wide ResNet on one side on the energy-based model in the same time, mixing both. And the interesting thing is that as long as we look to classification, basically we are on the same level of performance. I guess that the 1% of discrepancy comes from the kind of regularization that we are introducing by using this additional task. But this is for the classification part. So we are still able to classify, but what we have in more is that we are able to generate samples of imagery because we have these generative models. No, with your standard ResNet, Google, or wide ResNet, you cannot do that. And this is the really interesting thing here is that, for instance, on the left, on the two left columns, you have true examples of the Eurostat dataset. On here, you have examples of what was generated using our trained energy-based model. And as you can see, it may differ from class to class. Some ones are a bit more difficult, for instance, the industrial ones. Also the forest one, we don't know why, but basically we're able to make images with highways, with rivers, with fields, on various kind of fields. Here you have the open fields, you also have here some kind of, let's say, semi-forest, semi-pasture area, and so on. Okay. This was really, really interesting to have this kind of stuff because by learning the statistics of the data, we are able to do lots more of things. On this, as you can see here, this is a supervised, the supervised way. Now I move to this slide, and actually you are discovering these results right now because they were generated by Ravera Castillo Navarro. I guess she is in the audience also right now. Yesterday, between yesterday and today. So you have the primer of those results. Is that we can do semi-supervised learning also with this kind of network. We do semi-supervised learning with only 5% or 25% of the training set, of the training labels. And the good news is that it works surprisingly well. Actually, if you use only 5% of 25% of labels with your standard network, the performances are dropping a lot. Something from near perfect, you drop to 30% of results. With the joint energy-based model, you drop for near perfect, something that is still acceptable, much more than acceptable, 85 or 89% of good results, because of the understanding of what the data really are. If you look at the samples here, same thing, pretty nice highways, nice river, nice fields, pretty nice cities also. And this is not all, because with this understanding of what the data look like, I mean, from a statistical point of view, you can do much more thing. You can derivate very nice application. For instance, here we move to another kind of imagery. This is Beirut, so in Lebanon. And this kind of image was not in the Eurostat dataset because Euro in Eurostat means Europa. So all the training data were from Europe. And we apply our classifier. We have something that is quite nice. The sea is recognized as a sea. Here the urban area and residential area are understood as urban area and so on. And with that, since we have the likelihood of the classifier, we are also able to build this confidence map that is telling us how good our classifier is confident in what he is predicting. Okay, so actually this is a kind of uncertainty assessment of what the classification map is good. Second thing that is second kind of application that is also very promising is when you have some issues in your data. So for instance, some missing area. This could be, for instance, a cloud in imagery. You can do the image in painting and reconstruct what should look like the area beyond the discarded zone here. This can happen also for image restoration. Imagine that you have a defective sensor, some dead pixel in it. You know they are dead. That's not very difficult to know, to discover. And you are able to correct this and to reconstruct the original image. Okay, so actually that's some of the conclusions that I will reach. Here we have lots of promising stuff to do in the next years by moving from discriminative model to generative learning. So it's time to conclude, I guess. So in a few words, there are more than 1,200 satellites right now. And the next standard for the next decade would be to have a constellation of satellites. This is great in one sense, because for each area, we will be able to have very high resolution data every day, maybe several times a day. So we are moving from one image that you want to classify on this image is this one for this year to real-time monitoring of the Earth. So the interest in that, especially if you think in terms of AI for good, is that maybe we will have the instruments to be able to auscult and to audit our planet every day at every moment, and so as a good doctor be able to take the right decisions with respect to that. But for being able to doing that, we have to also to make a major change in the way we are processing the EO data. And so there are lots of new fields that I'm pretty sure will be very important in the next years. That is reinforcement learning, continual learning, this kind of stuff I showed you before. Also going unsupervised, because of course there will not be labels for everything. And also new cases which happen, so few or zero shot learning will be of course very interesting. And only dealing from myself, I guess that there are lots of stuff that are interesting in that I want to pursue in the works I've shown you today. Of course, the continual learning part, moving on what we found about the domain adaptation case with continual learning. And the idea is to go to lifelong learning of models to be able to adapt to new data. And of course, the generative modeling on this last application that I've shown you, using generative models to be able to really have the good grasp of what is behind the data. So I thank you very much for your attention. Maybe I was a bit longer than planned. Just please have a look at the brilliant students which made most of the works here. Rodrigo Daut, who is now a postdoc at ETHZ and defended his PhD last year. Gaston Lenzner and Elvira Castillo are currently PhD students with ONIRA and French universities. And Veda Sunkara is with Cloud2Street in the US. Thank you very much.